Malcolm Gladwell, and you just brought up faith, and
Yeah.
nobody who is talking about your book in the mainstream media is mentioning the element. You say that there are three things. It's faith, courage, and determination.
Yeah.
Nobody's talking about faith.
It's an odd thing. I mean, this book began as I just wanted, in the manner of my previous books, to do this kind of, use a lot of social science, work through theories, tell some stories about the fact that disadvantages are often advantageous and advantages can be. But by the end of the book, I realized that what I really wanted to talk about was faith, was about the weapons of the Spirit.
Are you a spiritual guy?
I am. Well, it's funny. This is also part of it. I come from a profoundly religious background, had drifted away, and with this book, I am now coming back.
I was really, I wanted to know that. I mean, just looking at David and Goliath, and then just reading the opening chapter is riddled with. I mean, you can tell that you at least had done your homework, but it's not. This is not written. I mean, I don't know you. I don't know where you stand on anything, and I'm not going to ask you where you stand on anything. But I'm reading this, and I'm like, I could have written this. You're not the guy. I don't know who you're supposed to be, but you're not the guy I think some people expect when they read this, because you can tell you have deeper spiritual well.
Well, there's two things. There were two things doing this book that brought that to the fore. One was, I have a chapter where I talk about this little town in the mountains of France. During this, it was a bunch of Huguenots, a dissident Protestant sect in a very Catholic country, up in the mountains. During the Second World War, they decided they were going to harbor any Jewish refugees that came to their door, and Jewish refugees came by the thousands. They took them in, and they told the Nazis, "We're taking them in. If you want to come and get them, we're not going to give them to you. We don't care what you do to us." It's this extraordinary story, and if you read into it, they had nothing. They had no resources, no weapons. They refused to lie, so they weren't using deceit. Mm-hmm. All they had was their faith, and that was enough. They felt that their faith was every bit the match for whatever the Nazis threw at them. And you cannot read, I don't care if you are the most dyed-in-the-wool atheist, you cannot read that story and not come away with a renewed appreciation for the power that faith gives people.
See, I think that's what people miss, though, about what built us in the first place as a country, is that we were people of faith. Some people used faith to, condone slavery. Slavery was stopped by people of faith. That's what's made us unique. That's what makes America, because once you have faith, you either go manifest destiny, which is slaughter everybody because God tells me to, and you go down that awful road, or you go down this road of I can change the world, I can help people, and you stand and you just keep standing. That's what we've always been, and there seems to be this giant erasing of faith. I mean, I don't know if you have an honest desire to fix things, why you would discourage people from having faith in something, unless it's to kill people.
Yeah. The other, the interesting part of this as well, though, is I think sometimes people of faith don't always understand how powerful their faith makes them. I mean, I was telling that story about the village in France. There were lots of committed Christians in France who didn't have the courage to go up against the Nazis because they thought they were at a hopeless disadvantage. It was just, what's fascinating to me about that story is, it's just this little group in the mountain who understand, whoa, armed with, the Spirit of the Lord, we can more than hold our own against a bunch of guys with tanks and that's a kind of, it's so rare that you see people who appreciate, and that's what, in the original story of David and Goliath, what David understands that no one else in the Israelite army understands is that, and I tell that story at the beginning of my book in this sort of new kind of fun way.
Really good way.
But part of it is, I talk about how the sling is actually really, really superior technology. It's the most devastating weapon. In fact, the rock fired from David's sling. I had a ballistics expert in the Israeli Defense Force explain this to me. The rock from David's sling is coming with the stopping power equivalent to a .45 caliber handgun. This is not a child's toy, right? David is like, well, but David understands that with superior technology and the Spirit of the Lord, I'm not the underdog, right? David does not think, we've been telling that story as if he's this incredible long shot. He's not the long shot. I mean, with those two things on his side, he's the favorite, isn't he? I mean, that's how I read that story. And I think I think...
How do you write for the New Yorker? I'm just looking at you, just listening to you, thinking, I've not heard a New York writer ever say that to me. Ever. I mean, I have a lot of Christian friends. I have a lot of pastor friends who don't have that understanding of David and Goliath.
I should introduce you to some of my Mennonite pastor friends who would tell you this. But no, I don't think... How am I? Well, you know, there's more. You'd be surprised. Beneath the surface of places like the New Yorker, there's a lot more diversity than you think. And remember, until I wrote this book was a weird journey for me, you know? All of these things, I came back to all of these issues that I wouldn't have said this 3 years ago either. It's funny, but you've written many books, you know this. You start somewhere, and you think you know where you're going to end up, and you don't end up there.
I'll tell you, I just, Srini Rao was just on, and I wrote him a letter, and he published it. And it's, I guess, taken people by surprise. And I said, in the letter, I said, you know, the person that I was when I started this particular phase of my life in 2000, and talk radio and everything else, I was no longer that person when I was at Fox at the top. I had hit a ceiling where I felt like I was all kind of crouched over, and what the world either wanted or hated, I was no longer that anymore.
Yeah.
I wasn't that guy anymore. And so you have to decide, do I continue a journey, or am I happy with who I am? So if you don't change, you're dead or dead inside.